Welcome back, y'all. We got yet another fairly large Gears 5 update from the Coalition, and I assume this won't be the last one we get, seeing as Operation 3 is right around the corner since Operation 2 has about 2 weeks left. I have a feeling that we're going to be getting pretty large updates like this up until Operation 3 comes out, and maybe even a little bit after that. Now, as I said, this is a fairly large update. However, not all of it is live at the moment, and it's more of a roadmap for what's to come to Gears 5 in order to keep it balanced for months to come, and from then make tweaks and changes to make sure that everything is working as it should be. Now, it's fairly large. I've said that a couple times, so if you want to follow along or read it up at your own pace, a link will be in the description below. Now, as I mentioned, this is more of a roadmap with about 6 steps or phases they're going to be calling them, and I will be going through all of them, so buckle up and let's get right into it. Now, there's 6 phases. Phase 1 is expanding viable playstyles with responsive and skillful strafing. Phase 2 is balancing bouncing and strafing. Phase 3 is making the duels last longer. Phase 4 is making consequences more responsive. Phase 5 is greater opportunities to combine movement and shooting. And Phase 6 is weapon rebalancing. Now, we currently are in Phase 2. Phase 1 has already been completed, so we'll start with what Phase 1 is. Phase 1 is expanding viable playstyles with responsive and skillful strafing. As I mentioned, this has already been completed, and the purpose of this phase is to rebalance the movement in order to raise the viability of strafing play from both short-range combat and mid-range combat in order to give defensive play a little bit more balance. Now, instead of completely raising the movement speed, what they've done instead is they've increased the acceleration. So instead of being able to run much faster, you're actually going to accelerate to that maximum speed much faster. It's a little bit different. I know it sounds like the same thing, but there is a difference to it. And not only have they increased the acceleration, but they've also increased the movement from left to right, as well as the backwards movement speed. And they do have some numerical numbers which I'll put up on screen. And again, as I mentioned, it will be in the description below if you want to look it up on your own. But the base walk acceleration has been increased by 50%. So it used to be a numerical number of 2,000. It has now been increased to 3,000. Backwards movement speed has been increased by 15%, roadie run speed has been increased by 5%, slide to cover speed increased by 3.5%. This is that wall bouncing that we all know and love. Cover slip speed boost increased by 3.5%. This is when you're in cover and you go around the corner. That has been increased. And the roadie run to shoot delay decreased by 25%. This means that while you are roadie running, you can come to a stop and pull up your weapon much faster. So these are all from Phase 1, and as I mentioned, this has all been completed already. On to Phase 2. This is balancing, bouncing, and strafing. So with the changes from Phase 1 that increase movement speed, they are going to have to balance out the way you wall bounce from place to place. We don't have too much information on this one, seeing as this one is still in progress and it's still being worked on, but they do address a few concerns. The first one being the legacy melee speed boost exploit. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I talked about it in my last video, but essentially what it is that if you knife and then wall bounce, you would get a slight speed increase. And they just mentioned it. It wasn't an exploit. It wasn't meant to be in the game, but it did kind of give you an unfair advantage, seeing as it lets you move around the map much faster. Now, it wasn't for the entire match that you would get this speed boost, but it was for a few seconds after knifing. The next point that they address in Phase 2 is the fact that somebody standing still that goes into a wall bounce has the same advantage as somebody who is already in roadie running state. So what they're trying to do in this case is that if you're standing still, you will not get the speed boost that somebody who is roadie running wall bouncing would get, which means that when two people come into combat, the person who is roadie running and goes into that wall bounce will have the advantage in most cases. On to Phase 3 now. This is making the duels last longer. This is also still in progress, and by duels they mean Nasher fights. So For the last week or so, the coalition has been tweaking the way the Nasher works, and for the most part, the community reception has been positive. They've liked the Nasher updates, but they are tweaking it yet again, because even though they were going in the right direction, it still quite wasn't where they wanted it to be, and I agree with them. It was much better than what it used to be, but I could still use a few tweaks and changes to make it a little bit better. Now, we have gotten exactly what they're going to be doing with the Nasher. So here is a nice little graph that will showcase everything that is happening to the Nasher at the moment. The red line is the old Nasher that we were playing with about like 2-3 weeks ago. The dotted line is the Nasher that is currently in game right now. And the green line is what they want the changes to be. This graph can be a little confusing, so let's break it down a little bit, starting at the top left. As you can see, the red line is higher than the rest, and it's also slightly off to the right, as you can see by that red bar going down. What this means is that you were doing more damage at a slightly farther range compared to the current Nasher. The current Nasher being that dotted line. As we can see, the gib range was dropped from 256 down to 230, which means you were doing slightly less damage, but you also had to be a lot closer in order to get that one-shot kill. Now, with the Nasher that they're currently working on, they're going to increase that damage from what we currently have, as you can see from the green line that's in between both of them. So it's going to be a little bit of both. It's going to be a mix of the old Nasher and the current Nasher, in which you will be doing slightly more damage, but you are going to have to be a lot closer to get that damage compared to before, where you could be slightly farther away and you were doing a lot more damage. So this will bring some more balance to the Nasher. Now, moving on towards the right, we can start seeing what they mean by that poke damage that was also introduced. Looking at the middle right slash bottom, you'll see that the red line, being the old Nasher, would start doing practically 0 damage at around 1000 Unreal units. That is the measurement that Gears 5 runs off of. So the farther away the enemy was, you were practically doing 0 damage. Now, looking at the current Nasher, which is that green dotted line, we see that once it hits 1000 Unreal units, you will still be able to do about 100 points of damage, depending on how many pellets hit. Now, for reference, a Gears player slash character has about 600 points of health, which means you would actively be doing 1/6 of their damage. With the new Nasher update coming up, you will be able to do 200 points of damage at 1000 Unreal units, depending on how many pellets hit. The final change coming to the Nasher in Phase 3 is going to be that there will be increasing the ammo capacity on spawn. So previously you would spawn in with 18 rounds, you will now be spawning with 30 rounds. Now to make things clear, they are not increasing the magazine capacity, they're increasing the ammo capacity. So in previous Gears games, the Nasher had 8 rounds in the magazine, and in Gears 5 it was brought down to 6. It is still going to stay at 6. It is only the ammo capacity that is changing from 18 to 30. On to Phase 4, making consequences more responsive. Unlike Phase 3 and 2, this one is not in progress, and it's just something that they're kind of thinking about and still don't know how they are going to implement it. But we do have a small little snippet of what they want to do and what they mean by making consequences more responsive, and I'll read that off right now. Rather than making each action punish with a delay, we want to move towards a system that provides trade-offs. Instead of having a wall cancel cooldown as we've had since Gears of War 4, we will introduce short slowdowns on slides following a cancel. The more you cancel, the more you will reset the slowdown. The slowdown will fade off quickly. This means that if you use longer slides, i.e. more efficient with your cancels, you will be able to move faster and evade better. If you cancel too much, you will make yourself more of a target. We will take time to tune this value to feed natural and intuitive. This point isn't to remove hyper bouncing anymore, just make a trade-off. If you can find the best rhythm of sliding, you will have the most combat potential. Now, what this means is that you have to be really good with your wall bouncing. Now, wall bouncing isn't necessarily like a high-tech strat, but it is something that takes quite some time to perfect. So the better you are at it, the less you will notice that you're feeling sluggish. So if you're not really good at wall bouncing, you will be able to tell, seeing as you will be a lot slower than somebody that is much better than you are at it. And what this phase addresses, and this isn't necessarily that the faster you are at wall bouncing, the better you will be. As they mentioned, they are not going to get rid of hyper bouncing, but they say that the more consistent you are. So you can still be really fast, but as long as you're consistent, you will have a lot of combat potential. Up next is Phase 5, which is greater opportunities to combine movement and shooting. Much like Phase 4, this one is not in progress, and it's more of an idea of something that they want to do, but still no way of actually implementing it. And what they mean by greater opportunities to combine movement and shooting is that out of a dodge, out of a roll, out of a wall bounce, out of a cover vault, they will be balancing how quickly you can bring up your gun and shoot it. So basically, like that dead zone between your character coming out of that vault slash dodge and shooting. So they're going to balance that out. Not so much information on this one either, seeing as this is Phase 5 and we still don't know how far in the future this one is. And finally, we have Phase 6, Weapon Rebalancing. This one is pretty self-explanatory. They have currently rebalanced the Gnasher, seeing as that's the main weapon of Gears, or Gears of War in general. That's the one that they wanted to nail down first. But after everything from Phase 1 through Phase 5 has been completed, they will start working on balancing other weapons, and they mainly say that they want to focus on the snub pistol, the Marksa, and the flashbang. The Marksa and the flashbang have already had a few nerfs in the past, which kind of make them obsolete, but they are going to go back and look into those. Now, that is all the phases we know of right now. Phase 1 through 6, we don't know the time frame between when they will be coming out. As I mentioned, Phase 1 is the only one that has been completed at the moment. Phase 2 and Phase 3 are in progress, with Phase 4, 5, and 6 still being an idea and coming sometime in the future. Well, that is all we know as of right now. As I mentioned, this was a fairly large update slash roadmap. I tried to get through it as quickly as possible, but if you want to go through it at your own pace, again, it will be in the description below. Feel free to check that out. And anyways, that is all I have for y'all today. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments below on any of these phases, which one you're most concerned about or which one you're kind of looking forward to the most. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps out a lot. And hope you have a good one. Catch y'all next time.